I'm John.
I'm Rob.
And this is the Mint One podcast,
where we talk all things NFTs and the rise of blockchain gaming.
So Rob, has play-to-earn gaming wronged developing nations?
Well, the mainstream media seems to think it has. Let's have a look.
Okay, Rob, so before we get into the other topic for this podcast, a lot's happened in the past week. First off, we met in person for the first time.
We did, which is crazy that it's taken that long, but take that long it did.
Yeah, 34 episodes in, and we finally met each other in London, which was very cool.
It was.
Secondly, Minecraft announced that they hate NFTs, which has had some interesting reaction from both within Web3 and outside of it.
I think I wrote an article about the news piece, obviously, and let me get your reaction first. What did you make of it?
Well, obviously, I'm against them preventing projects from implementing NFTs in any case. I think the reasoning they gave was, I understand where they're coming from, but I think it's a bit shaky. So they talked about, NFTs can go up and down in price, and you might, essentially token gate a Minecraft server, or, only be able to buy or only be able to use X Minecraft skin if you have this NFT, and, they were worried about profitability coming before gameplay, which is, they're topics we've discussed on the podcast before. But I don't really think them saying, NFTs aren't in the spirit of Minecraft, whatever they're trying to say that is, was the kind of the right argument to go down if they wanted to come up with a reason why they didn't want to have Web3 companies implement NFTs. So what were your thoughts on it?
So I thought, as far as banning NFTs in games go, they were the best so far, because they did at least say that it's something that they will keep analysing, they will keep an eye on, and they think if they can keep their community safe, then perhaps they'll look at allowing them in the game. The reason I have some empathy for that is something we've talked about a lot. Minecraft is more or less marketed at children.
Yes.
That's not to say it's not a game that's played by adults all over the world, and it's an iconic cult game, but it does have a huge player base of under 18s, and NFTs are still largely unregulated, and we have seen the sort of behaviour some projects partake in that would be completely immoral in most circumstances, but indefensible and completely immoral against children. So I think I could have done a better job of explaining why they should ban them. Not that I think they should have. I think there's probably other ways, but I actually don't blame them for what they've done. I don't blame them for that. It does raise a lot of questions with some projects that are building on Minecraft servers. There's loads of them. And don't know where they go from here. I don't know what they do. Yeah,
there's quite a few. The biggest one on the Wax blockchain would, of course, be Uplift Worlds, which they're now run by a DAO. So the DAO is now deciding the best thing to do. I think as we speak, they're currently voting on whether they should try and give the NFTs utility in a game that isn't Minecraft. To try and basically port it to another game, which is one option. But of course, the biggest collection that uses or is based around Minecraft is NFT Worlds, which was selling land in Minecraft effectively for quite a bit of ETH. And I think they've announced that they are going to. I'm not sure if they said they're going to move to, or they're going to build their own Minecraft-esque experience, so that the utility that was sold to collectors is still the same, which would be interesting. Would be very interesting for sure.
Yeah, I think these games need to either refund their player base, which they're not going to do, let's be honest, or they need to find a way of implementing the NFTs in a new way. The problem is, and I think you're going to see a lot of projects do this, they'll be like, all right, no worries, forget Minecraft, we'll just do it in our own engine. We'll not necessarily build our own engine, but perhaps we'll use Unity or some sort of pre-built game. I think they're not necessarily going to be aware of how expensive that can be, in not only in terms of getting it off the ground and basic development, but upkeep as well. It's, these sort of games run into problems all the time, particularly when they're sandbox games. People are always trying to find ways to exploit it. So it's a tricky one. I really think it's going to be rough to get out of this situation. But this is why I'm giving a little preview here. But this is why I'm writing an article for NFT Insider at the moment, based on digital sharecropping, where people are building things on other people's land without knowing their feelings towards what they're building.
Yep.
And this is exactly what's happened on Minecraft, and it's going to happen in other games as well. I don't know enough about Roblox to know if this is possible there, but that's another example. Then there's the GTA 5 private servers. There's several games several companies that have implemented NFTs in those. I think it's a strange time for NFT gaming, and particularly when you're building on someone else's platform. It's always been. So I'm not going to go into this too much because there's a whole article coming for you. But I warned of this in photography, in the other sector I've worked for sort of 10 years, because people were building huge followings on platforms. Like, one of the first ones I saw as a problem was Flickr. People were uploading their pictures to Flickr, getting a huge following, getting work from Flickr. And then obviously if you start getting paid for doing something, or you start getting clients from working in a certain area, you're just going to keep pressing that because you know that's what you do in business. If you find something that works, you keep doing it. And then Flickr really fell out of favor. I mean, it's still really popular, but it fell out of favor a bit. And I used to get work through it, and then I stopped getting work through it, and I didn't really care because I wasn't trying to build a following. But we've seen this time and time again. Instagram is a brilliant example, and this was the one that prompted my article, is that people were building businesses on Instagram with Instagram as the basis for their business. And then Instagram changed their algorithm. Suddenly these businesses aren't getting the same sort of traffic, they aren't getting the same sort of sales, and they were basically building on quicksand. They were building on someone else's property, and that person can change the landscape at any point. And that's what we're seeing in blockchain gaming at the moment. There's a lot of people, to save having to do long-term development of, an entire game engine or an entire game on a complex engine like Unity or Unreal Engine, they are building on games that are already established, that are made with building in mind. And now we're seeing things like Minecraft pulling the plug. And God knows how much money has gone into these games, not only in development, but from players who are interested in playing in a Web3 version of Minecraft server. So, it's bad. I think it could get really, really messy over the next few months.
Yeah, it could get messy. I'm not sure whether or not Mojang, the team behind Minecraft, really kind of thought about the ramifications of what their kind of updated policy would be. But as you said, it's good that they're keeping an open mind, and they say they may revisit the topic in future, which is good. Just on your point there, it's as a side note, it's why you see so many people that blow up on YouTube or Twitch as quickly as possible try to build a following on other platforms as well. So YouTubers will immediately try and get a secure line of funds through Patreon, where viewers themselves are directly given money for content rather than having to rely on the whims of the algorithm and advertisers and all of that kind of thing. I was at the Global NFT Summit last week, and that's been my last point on Minecraft. And I can't remember exactly who said this. It was either Sebastian Bourget from the Sandbox, or it was Dirk Kluth from Upland. I can't remember which of the two. But they did say that for NFT Worlds in particular, it was kind of their fault for not contacting Mojang in the first place and asking what their thoughts would be on this kind of project before taking. I mean, I don't know how much money NFT Worlds has raised, but you'd think it'd be the responsible thing to do if you're planning on or are going to raise, 6 figures, 7 figures through selling a product to the public. But anyway, that's something we can revisit. Something else before we go into the last thing, before we get into the topic for the pod, is I can't remember if it was last podcast or a couple of podcasts ago, and we were talking about the metaverse, and I put up a tweet early this week, which basically said, I've yet to hear anyone explain what a metaverse is in simple, clear, unambiguous terms. Anyone fancy giving it a go? And we had some...
No, thank you.
We had some interesting responses. I'd like to go through a few of them. One of the most popular responses was, you browse the internet, you experience a metaverse. I'm not quite sure I agree with that. I don't think the internet and the metaverse are the same. He goes on to say it's basically interconnected virtual worlds that act as a platform for online immersive experiences. I think the second half of that's closer. I think internet equals metaverse is probably a bit too broad. I'll pick out two others in particular. So a digital multi-user social ecosystem where individuals connect with others around the world through separate but connected spaces. I think that's too complex. I think it may be more accurate, but if you say that to someone on the street, they'd be like, what?
It's pretty vague, though.
What did you just say? Yeah, it's too vague. And kind of the third one I'll say is it's not what is a metaverse, it's how metaverse is it at a moment in time. The metaverse is always changing. At some point, NFTs and crypto may not even be the metaverse. They might be our own cybernetic minds. It's tough to answer a question that the answer is always changing too. I mean, I think it's viable for someone to ask what a metaverse is. But I don't think that answer is... I get where they're coming from that answer, but I don't think it's useful to your average Joe on the street.
No.
And I think even Google have... I was looking at LinkedIn the other day, and there's a guy here called John Radoff who wrote an article for the Pew Research Center on metaverses, and basically his definition of metaverse is now the number one ranked one on Google. And his definition is that they are an embodied virtual reality experience, a Web3 framework for economic interoperability, and a creative platform for experiences. Which
that's probably pretty good.
Okay. Actually. Here's a question for you: do you think metaverses need to be in VR?
No,
neither do I.
Don't. I think they may end up there.
Yeah,
but I don't think it's a prerequisite for a metaverse.
It's weird how all the kind of most common definitions of metaverses that come up by various people all mention it. It must be in VR. It has to have a VR aspect, but
it's just Ready Player One, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, it's people think of.
It's clear even on that point that people have wildly different expectations of what a metaverse is. So it's something we'll I'm sure we'll revisit in time. I'm sure as time goes on, people might get closer to an agreed to definition of what a metaverse finally is. But anyway, on to the topic of the podcast, which is has play to earn gaming wronged developing nations? Now, this topic came from a Time article that was published 3 days ago. By Andrew Chow and Chad D. Guzman, titled "A Crypto Game Promised to Lift Filipinos Out of Poverty. Here's What Happened Instead." So, of course, this article is about Axie Infinity. And basically, they spoke to a Filipino man who kind of made his living for an amount of time through Axie, and it talked about... The article talks about kind of the responsibility of Axie in this scenario, after the crypto crash and the bull market the bear market that we're in at the moment. And coming out of this article, somebody posted it to r/games on Reddit, and some of the comments are quite fruity, I suppose. And I thought it was worth talking about for this episode of the pod.
So you sent me down a rabbit hole. I was in a good mood before you sent me into this rabbit hole. It was you sent me into the trenches rather than a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So I generally avoid our gaming when it mentions NFTs in any way, because it just elicits the same response every single time, and you see variations of the same comments. It's a little bit like there's lots of subreddits that are quite politically motivated, and if you go in any of those and say the opposite opinion or post anything with the opposite opinion, you're just going to get torn to shreds. It doesn't necessarily mean you're wrong or they're right, but it's just how Reddit is. It's how the internet is. However, the article annoyed me for a number of reasons, and I think we're going to talk a lot about Axie Infinity here, but I actually don't think Axie Infinity is necessarily the most interesting part of this question.
Yeah.
I think it's just a foundational part of the question.
Yeah.
But before we get on to answering that, I guess we need to look at this article in particular. So I don't know where to start really. There's some things that I want to call out straight away. The first, I'm going to try and be as balanced as I can, because if I'm not, then I'm doing the same thing they are from a different perspective. But this story is sensationalist in the extreme.
Yeah.
It's as if they've gone out of their way to find the worst possible story they could. So we'll put it in the show notes so you can read it. But if you haven't read it, essentially it's a young man. I think he was 26 or 25 in a developing nation, the Philippines, struggling to earn enough money to live and to take care of his sick mother who had had a stroke. I mean, immediately, if you're not in his camp, you're a psychopath. And so my first point was, this is so sensationalist. What it's doing is, rather than appealing to logic, it's appealing to emotions, which is it's a common debating technique, and it's used in every type of media. But it's very frustrating to see when someone's talking against you, but they're giving the best example I've got of this at the moment is an NFT. An NFT? What am I talking about? A podcast that's nothing to do with NFTs. Mm-hmm. And they were talking to the people who were on the jury of a miscarriage of justice. And basically it became a hung jury because some people wouldn't acquit this guy who wasn't guilty for a crime. And they were interviewing the guy who was pushing for him to go to prison. And he was saying things like, well, he looks like a thug. And he's got tattoos all over his arms. And it's our duty to make sure the streets are safe. And like he wasn't engaging with the question. He was just, and he convinced a load of jurors that, okay, maybe it is the best thing to put this guy in prison, even though he hadn't there wasn't, like, reasonable doubt was, I mean, it's so reasonable. But the point of this is that the guy that was converting this jury was simply appealing to emotion. He wasn't appealing to evidence or logic. And that's what this article does. It appeals to emotion. And I was getting myself in a bit of a state about how angry I was at Time magazine, which is, iconic. And they actually also have a presence in the metaverse, in inverted commas, metaverse. But, because they're building Times Square, like Times. Yeah. So, I mean, whatever. I guess they have to be balanced. But then I started thinking, is it hypocritical to say that they're appealing to emotions when they should be appealing to logic, when the initial groundswell of Play to Earn did the exact same thing from the opposite angle? Yeah. I mean, I wrote articles about, so I'm going to reference this 100 times in this podcast, but I've also mentioned it about 20 episodes ago, Leah Callum Butler's documentary on Play to Earn, where she went to the Philippines and interviewed people. This is really early, late 2020, early 2021. So it was before Play to Earn was really well established. And in this documentary, it's really uplifting, because people who were struggling during COVID, like the height of COVID, they couldn't put food on their table. It is genuine breadline poverty in a developing nation. They were struggling to make the minimum wage in the Philippines is very low. Cost of living is very low. And basically this Axie Infinity was just bringing people out of starvation and struggling and stress, and putting money in their pockets and food on their tables by playing a game. And it was inspiring. And I wrote about it in the same way that a lot of people did, where I was showing the good it's doing, but wasn't really appealing to the evidence of whether it's sustainable, which many people called out Axie Infinity's economy as unsustainable, which they've arguably been proven correct on. And I think maybe I'm kind of as bad in a way as this article, because I was promoting it, but I feel like this article is really laying into Play to Earn as a whole and crypto as a whole. And it keeps using things like Ponzi scheme and using tired cliches, rather than focusing on Axie, which it says it's about Axie, but it's not. It's talking about the whole play to earn sector, the whole crypto industry. And that's where I think it really wronged it. I've noticed that this soliloquy has gone on for a long time, so it's coming back over the net at you.
So there's a couple of points I want to bring up from the back of that. Firstly, just as a bit of context, I'm half Filipino. My mother's side of the family is Filipino, and I have members of my family that I know for some time did play Axie Infinity and were playing it as a way to supplement their income, let's say. And it is very true that for a lot of them, playing Axie was getting them more money at the end of the month than having a traditional job, like what this article from Time describes. So that bit is true. But going through the article, as you said, it starts off with this guy, Samuson Orias, was earning 4,000 pesos a month, which is about $80, making Japanese octopus balls, and he basically made 7 to 8 times that playing Axie Infinity. Whilst it does touch on the fact that Axie Infinity kind of promoted itself as a play-to-earn game, what I think this article implies, and what a lot of people in the Reddit comments have latched onto, is the belief that Axie Infinity was somehow promoting itself as, hey, this can replace your full-time job. I mean, even the title says, a crypto game promised to lift Filipinos out of poverty. I don't think it ever did that, and it would be horrifically responsible for any play-to-earn game to promise that to its players. That's just horrifically sensationalist headlining, which is, for a lot of people that don't read the article, if they just latch onto that headline, then they're immediately going to think that, crypto games are bad. And the article goes into the specific structure of Axie Infinity and how it kind of enabled people like Samuson here to kind of be wronged by the game once we entered a bear market. But just saying it's crypto games in the headline, as you said, it looks like, or it feels like an attack on the concept of play to earn itself, the concept of Web3 and blockchain and NFT games, and it as you said, it's very sensationalist. I'm just scanning through the article here. There was a specific line in it. Bear with me. You can jump in here, Rob, if you like.
Yeah, I'll jump in while you look for it. So, firstly, I completely agree, and I've noted down some similar things. I did actually look into whether Axie had at any point said their game is a way of surviving, or a way of earning an income, and I couldn't find it. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but I couldn't find it in my cursory searches. And that isn't to say there aren't games that have done that, because there have been. And I wasn't even 100% sure that Axie definitely hadn't, because they were very successful, and that play to earn element was more or less the reason for it. As fun as the game may be, I barely touched it, but I think it's wrong to demonize them for that, but not necessarily wrong for the sector to be criticized for that sort of thing, because lots of games pitched the game in terms of how much you could earn rather than how much you enjoy it. But I don't know if I've ever seen a game that's pitched itself as a way of, quit your job, play this game full time. I don't think I've ever seen that. I mean, that really would be the limit. And I imagine if we'd seen it, it would have been in a podcast already. Mm-hmm.
So I'd seen that. But just take a drink of water there. So I found the quote I was looking for. So about halfway through the article, and this is after I believe 5 paragraphs, which is kind of hey, the bottom's fallen out of the crypto market. Loads of people are losing loads of money. Sky Mavis, they had a hacker targeted the Ronin bridge, and they lost all of this money, and blah blah. And the following paragraph after kind of all of those negative points is, meanwhile, vast amounts of money are still being pumped into the blockchain gaming industry. So I can't see how Time can't say they're kind of not attacking the industry as a whole here. This isn't this isn't an article about just Axie Infinity. It's deliberately about blockchain gaming as a whole, but using...
Can I just jump in with one small caveat? So I've been an editor of a major website for a long time, and one thing we've been criticised about is people used to... This happened all the time. People used to email and tweet at me as an editor and at the company 2 different articles on our site that had contrasting views.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, look at this, like F-Stoppers doesn't know which side it's on. Mm-hmm. But we've had up to 90 writers at a time, and they each have different opinions. Yeah. So I don't want to tar time too much with this, because it could well have been I think it's the job of a good editor to balance out the articles and allow people to express different opinions. So it's not necessarily like cognitive dissonance for time to, buy land in the metaverse and then slag off the gaming, play to earn and crypto gaming industry. But this article definitely is doing that, even if it says it's not.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I entirely agree with you there. And funnily enough, it's something that's happened at NFT Insider before, when I've written something and then we've had a freelancer kind of write an opposite opinion. It's something that I've had messages about in the past. But in any case, kind of moving on to my next point about this Time article is they provide no references for a lot of the claims that they make. So all of the financials, fine, you can go and look them up. But there's a few lines here that you'd think they would have there'd be some kind of reference or some kind of link or just something to verify what they're saying. So there's one quite near the start, but towards the end of the article, this is just after talking about their valuation and the money they've raised and kind of the risk for players who might buy into Axie Infinity. The next paragraph starts, and Filipino scholars who were told that blockchain games would bring radical economic change are walking away confused and jaded. Several scholars Time talked to said they owe hundreds or even thousands of dollars to friends or family who helped them pay their initial investment, only for their monsters to become worthless. You think somewhere in that they would give some kind of info to who those people are? Or the experience of these scholars. They're basically saying, hey, these anonymous people we've spoken to have told us this, with nothing to qualify it.
They did this earlier in the article. I think this is probably what you're referring to, but I happened to write it down, where they said, they quote Samerson Arias. Am I saying that right? You kind of rolled the R a little bit.
Samerson Arias, I think. Arias. Maybe I'm rolling it and I shouldn't be, but...
Well, I mean, you've got more Filipino background than me, so as the whitest man on earth, I have to make these efforts. Anyway, a Filipino who played Axie to live and others said Axie reinforced predatory systems and gave them false hope. Firstly, not to be disrespectful to Samerson, but his English wasn't of that standard. To say that, so they've definitely paraphrased him. And also, who are these other people that have like you say, they're not citing anything. They're just, anyone can do this. Or just, I heard this, I'm going to put it in an article. I just think that's dishonest journalism. But I've got the thing that really irked me about this article is, I know we've already discussed the sensationalist element, but towards the end of the article it said Arias drifted away from the game toward the end of last summer after his mother died of a heart attack. Her funeral wiped out his savings, including the $200 he saved up playing Axie. He said, I feel regret and I wasn't able to provide for my mum. Now he's back in the takoyaki stand and hopes he can save up for a food stand of his own. He said, for those having a hard time, for those pushed to their wits' end, he says of Axie, stop playing. That is, I mean, I'm sure he said that, and I'm sure he feels that way. But my God, I mean, I don't even know how to approach that. This is a tragic story of somebody, a young man who's struggling for money and having to look after his sick, dying mother. So that is the most horrendous circumstance you can imagine.
Yeah.
And he found something that, rather unlikely, but made him money when he was struggling to make enough money to live.
Yeah.
can we outright demonize that? I mean, you can outright demonize it if Axie had pitched the game as a way of surviving and had put up billboards in Philippines saying survive COVID, play Axie Infinity or something. Then, it's indefensible. But I don't know. I feel like this is really not giving a balanced representation of what the game did in the Philippines during COVID, when people literally couldn't eat. We'll put it in the show notes, that documentary from Leah Callum Butler that I mention, every 20 seconds. But it's just a really good counterbalance for this article, because you can see the positive impact it had and how it literally saved families from breadline. So I think you've got to balance it out. I don't think, as we've said, Axie never promised that it could save the world, or people from developing nations would no longer have to worry about money because they can just play this game. But at the same time, they didn't really manage their economy that well, and the criticisms in this article I've also read elsewhere, which is that it relied on new players buying in, and that's the only way that the economy could be sustained. And they defended that in I think a reasonably fair way, and said that's how anything works. Get new people in through the door, becomes more popular. But I can see that the problems with that, and the price of SLP or whatever is absolutely tanked. Mm-hmm. But so is the whole crypto market, and I think it's very much baby being thrown out with the bathwater. Just saying, well, people in developing nations were able to feed their families for a bit, but now they can't. Like, what's with that? We should bin this all off. It's horrendous. I don't think that's the reaction, is it? No,
and to kind of try and fuel to the fire for this article, they kind of frame the article at the beginning as being all about Samuelson and his story. And if you read through the article, there's maybe 2-3 quotes from him that say, some of them are quite negative towards Axie. So this one, at first I was happy, but after some time I noticed I was slowly getting weaker. I was feeling sleeplessness and getting stressed over the game, which is, obviously negative effects on him. But I almost feel like some of the things he said have been wildly taken out of context to fit Time's narrative. As you said, they don't really talk about the positive benefit. Even at the very end of the article, it says even though it is a very tragic story, he was able to save up. He lost his Axie account, he lost some money, but he was able to save up some money playing Axie that went towards his mother's funeral. And I feel like the article kind of drifts over that a bit.
You could definitely spin the story differently, couldn't you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Why did he? Firstly, I don't want to pretend I can get into his head or understand his situation. I've never been in a situation as dire as that, and I wish the guy well. I really do. Yeah. But if he was making enough money working on that stand making food, he wouldn't have been looking for other ways to try and dig himself out of poverty. He was struggling to take care of his sick mother, and a novel way of making money presented itself, and it just happened to be playing a game, which is, amazing that you can make money from playing a game. I think you could definitely spin the story in a different way. I think where people feel bitter and spurned is where they have put money, they've reinvested money into the game. Yeah. And then the crypto markets crashed and Axie got hacked, and it's tanked the price. But I think the crypto market, I feel like this article kind of frames, not that the crypto market crashing was Axie's fault, but because of the crypto market crashing, that all of this, faith that Axie put into its players that they can make a living off of it, it's their responsibility that these people playing the game can no longer afford to feed their families or pay their rent and things, which I think so. It's a fairly wild kind of accusation to make. Even at the start of the article, the title says a crypto game promised to lift Filipinos out of poverty. Here's what happened instead. Within the first 2.5 paragraphs, it says his friend, Samuelson's friend, told him that he and others were pocketing up to $600 a month playing Axie Infinity. And then the next paragraph goes on to describe, a Rice decided to try the game, blah, blah, blah.
So nowhere in that does it say, Axie engaged in, predatory marketing to try and grab this guy. And he was recommended it from a friend.
Word of mouth.
And can you really blame Axie for that? I don't think so. But I think my overarching point for kind of why we're talking about this article in particular is it's just another example of an article that is kind of the result of a media environment that feeds off of biased negative reporting, or at least that's my view of it. So I mean, if this article had been reworded to say, hey, Axie player is able to supplement himself through the COVID pandemic playing Axie. A few things did go wrong, but he was able to save up a little bit of money to go towards his mother's funeral who was ill. That's not the kind of article that's going to get anywhere near as much traction as the title of this Time article is, which is, hey, this predatory game has promised to lift this guy out of poverty, and instead it's ruined his life, and he has no savings anymore. And I just think there's something that I think I've already written about for NFT Insider, but I think there's another piece coming up that's going to talk about it. If this if this negative reporting on NFTs and cryptocurrency and Web3 and blockchain games continues, then I'm not surprised that the vast majority of not just the gaming community, but kind of the wider public believe that no good can come of blockchain tech. And that kind of segues me into the Reddit post, which I'll also link in the show notes. So about 24 hours ago, somebody to r/games on Reddit, as I said, basically just copied and pasted the link to this article, and it got a little bit of traction. And some of the comments are very interesting. Some are somewhat sympathetic to kind of, I guess, our view of this, but I'd say the overwhelming majority are saying, hey, it's a Ponzi scheme. Crypto games are, they're all a scam. They're all Ponzi's. They're all pyramids. Get out, get out, get out. Why would you ever put your money into one of these games? And the top comment, or the top comment that appears for me, it immediately references just the headline. So it says, and I quote, "As soon as I read the headline, I immediately knew it was Axie Infinity." You probably have already seen it with how often it's been shared on Reddit. But Dan Olsen's Line Goes Up video, which if you've not seen it, it's about an hour and a half, 2 hours long, which kind of breaks down basically the entire blockchain gaming industry and the NFT industry and up to that point, and kind of shows it in a negative light. I do think it has some good points, but that's kind of besides.
So do I. I watched it on a flight, and it's definitely a lot of people in crypto. I'm glad we're both on the same page here. A lot of people in crypto immediately were like, "This is terrible." I don't. I think he brings up a lot of fair points.
He does.
I don't like most of it, but he brings up a lot of fair points. Yeah.
Just to end that quote from the top comment on Reddit, he says, when this video, the Line Goes Up video from Dan Olsen, was uploaded in January, Olsen makes it clear that Axie was one of many crypto schemes made for exploitation under the veil of being a magic bullet that could lift people out of poverty. Again, Axie promoted itself as play to earn, and they obviously will have known they had a big Asian player base, but they've never expressly come out and said, hey, you can lift yourself out of poverty with this, or you can make X amount of money a week or a month. It's and just from this guy, there's no evidence that, I'm sure he did read the article, but his entire comment is based around just the headline, which as is the nature of the internet at large.
Of course. Most people wouldn't have read the article.
No, is the headline means a lot. And funny enough, if you kind of compare the headline to the article, they're both, the headline is very clickbaity, very harsh, very kind of direct. It's like, hey, all crypto games are banned. If you read the article, it's not quite like that. It has a negative slant on it, but if you kind of read between the lines, it tells a much different story to what the headline is trying to sell you. Let's say
it's the here's what happened instead.
Yeah.
It infers that you already know where that story is going. Can I read my favourite comment? And by favourite, I mean I had to take a walk after I read it.
Absolutely.
I can't remember the guy's username, and frankly, I don't care. I wrote it down in a Word document. It says, "It's a massive, massive scam that aims to take advantage of poor people with the promise of riches. And anyone who supports play-to-earn games, NFTs in games, or crypto in games supports this horrific business model that aims to make rich people richer at the expense of poor. It's absolutely disgusting, and these people should be in prison." I mean...
Yeah.
It's like he's daisy-chained incorrect statements. I mean, that firstly, what he's describing is capitalism, and we've seen it for hundreds of, if not 1,000 years. Secondly, I mean, I'd love to just have him justify each one of these things. What is he saying is a massive, massive scam? Is it Axie? I think he's talking about crypto as a whole, including NFTs. As for anyone who supports play-to-earn games, NFTs in games, or crypto in games, supports this horrific business model in which rich people get richer at the expense of poor people. That is the dictionary definition of capitalism, but I also don't think that's necessarily how anything works. You know, rich people often do get richer, and poor people often stay poor. That is the flaw of modern economics, if not always been the flaw of it. But I don't understand. I mean, this comes back to my episode with Dave. I still don't really understand the vitriol towards NFTs and games, because when I first heard about NFTs and games, I didn't understand them. This is a good few years ago now, and I didn't understand. I can't remember who told me about them anymore, but I remember Dave and I talking about it on a Discord call, and he got it before I did. He understood it. And he was trying to explain it to me, and then it suddenly just clicked, and I was like, oh, well, that's really cool. This is so good. I can't wait for this to be a thing. And now it's like the opposite has happened, and I'm so confused. It felt like nothing but a net positive. If you take away the environmental impact, if you take away the things that we have solved or are solving, like, you know, gas fees, blah, 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 I don't understand why you don't want to own the things you're buying in games. I don't get it. If you're earning an item in game, or you're buying an item through a microtransaction, owning that in your wallet that you can sell on and recoup some of the money back, what is it you don't like about that? Is it just the crypto community? Is it the crypto bros? Is it that crypto is so volatile? I think there's lots of reasons to be wary of it, but at the very most basic form of this, where you can own the things you earn in games, it just seems unambiguously good to me. And I think my final point on this is, a lot of my frustration comes from the fact that when I read these comments, and, you know, the Line Goes Up documentary, I watched it all, and when I read the criticisms, and I listen to the criticisms, and I watch the criticisms of blockchain gaming, of crypto, of Web3, of NFTs, of play to earn, of play and earn. And I try to understand them, and I find things that I agree with, and I think we should improve. And you and I always talk about ways in which the industry should improve. In fact, we did it so much, we had to do an upbeat episode just to offset our negativity. So there's lots I agree with. And I go to all this effort to try and find the perspective they see this situation from. But I don't feel like the people that are just laying into blockchain gaming every turn, I don't think they're doing their due diligence. I don't think they're trying to find ways in which it could be good. I don't think they ever. I mean, not everyone. Obviously, there are balanced people out there, but it doesn't feel like it at the moment. It feels black or white, and it's really tiring. You know, like we do, putting time into listening to these arguments and countering them and offering different opinions. And then other people it just seems like an echo chamber of people saying it's a scam and NFTs and games is the devil.
Yeah. I think you've kind of encapsulated my feeling pretty much perfectly there. Just as you were speaking and as I was listening along, I was flicking through some more of the Reddit comments, and the vast majority of them, rather than saying anything about Axie specifically, are all that all crypto is a Ponzi, or all blockchain games are a Ponzi, and there's no worth to them. And a couple of people saying like, oh, at least with like a real MLM, you get like some Tupperware or like supplements that don't work. Or
that's quite funny.
Which it's quite a funny point. But I think, as you said, with a lot of these people, there's little want to actually dive in and learn more and to expand their horizons. It's like, okay, this is my opinion and I'm going to stick to it. I have no interest in learning more or discovering if there are good aspects to this new technology, or possibly there have been some benefits to people in third world countries or developing nations or whatever. It's very much crypto is all bad. There's nothing good to it. End of. And it's not just the community at large saying that. It's media outlets, and it's influencers, and it's people that hold sway with the opinion of others. And I think what kind of the more, I'd say, balanced discussions that me and you have on this podcast are very much a rarity in the space. And I suppose we're fighting against kind of this torrent of misinformation. As we've said in the past, crypto and NFTs and blockchain and Web3, it isn't all good, but it isn't all bad either. There is a middle ground there, and there are viable applications, as well as there are bad actors who will try and exploit it for illegal or bad means. But that's a human issue. It's not an issue of the technology itself. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with blockchain technology. It's how particular people are using it, and how typical people, or how particular people rather, view how those bad actors are using the tech.
Yeah, it's a difficult situation, and it's frustrating to be outside of it. I think one of the things I always come back to, and maybe I'm just sort of feeling sorry for myself, and I'm definitely not typical for everyone that's involved in this, but I'm not a game developer. I am not an executive in the gaming sector. I have no industry background working in gaming. I am a gamer through and through. My dad was a gamer, still is a gamer. He's in his 60s. He still games every day, plays PC games. I'm just a gamer, and I love gaming. Why would I want to ruin it? What do you think? What's my motivation for this? The reason that I was attracted to NFTs and games, the reason we started Token Gamer, which we didn't really anticipate to be a business, we started it as a website where we could just put news and write about the topic, was because ownership is so cool and has so many applications. So it's frustrating. There was one more thing I wrote down, I think a lot of people were waiting for this to happen, because making money from a game it feels idealistic. It feels kind of ridiculous that, throughout human history, to earn a living or to feed yourself, you had to work hard. You had to do things you didn't want to do. That's what work always was. And over the last, I don't know, I haven't done the necessary research, but I'd probably say over the last 20 or 30 years, more and more jobs have been enjoyable, and more and more people are making money from doing what they want to do, rather than being thrust down a coal mine. Yeah. And this really represented the pinnacle of that, playing a game that, that's how the game started. Axie Infinity started as a game that people would enjoy. And if you watch the aforementioned documentary, a lot of them say, oh, I really like it, it's a fun game. This is, before it really kicked off. And they were playing it because they enjoyed the game. But I started to think about the question, which I think is a reasonable question, and I definitely want to hear what you think on this, is it possible to make money from gaming? Is this something that can be sustained long term? And I think it is, but I think it's got to change. I think the way it's working right now, it isn't sustainable. It can't be sustainable. However, and for any developers listening, I really think this is the route people should go. I think advertising in popular games is heavily underutilized. And I think the developers could strike a nice balance. Attention is the greatest currency we have at the moment, and that's what people are willing to pay a lot of money for. And I think there's ways that people can always earn money from playing a game. And if you have enough players in any game, you can earn money. I mean, people have been gold farming in WoW and, farming items for God knows how long. And I think that can continue. We just have to strike a balance, a better balance than we have. What do you make of that? Do you think play to earn, so this is what it's all going to come down to, isn't it? Play to earn or play and earn. Do you think play to earn can continue? Is it sustainable?
I think both phrases have the same core problem, is that whatever you call playing a game and earning money from it, whether it's play and earn, play to earn, play and own, whatever, the player at the end of it still views it as the same system. They still view it as, I'm playing a game, I'm earning something and I'm selling it for money. It doesn't matter kind of what words you dress it in. And there are games, and I don't want to say one way or the other whether I think Axie was one of them, that do focus a lot of their marketing on the earning potential, and not just games, marketplaces, and artists and other collections as well. It's like, hey, you buy this and the utility's got so much value, or hey, this game asset's can have so much utility in the game, and blah blah blah. So I think part of it is, players have come to expect that at this point. With so many games saying, hey, you buy these assets, they've got so much value in the game, then of course they're going to be like, if I buy this, I can make a profit off of it. So a part of it is now the expectation from the player base that's what they've come to expect from games, and part of it is the blockchain games that kind of continue to perpetuate the, hey, if you buy this, you can make money, whether it's explicit or whether it's more nuanced than that. But to kind of wind back a bit, and to get to kind of the root of this point, I think, is you wrote recently about Diablo Immortal on NFT Insider, and made reference to Diablo 3's real-world auction house, which was shut down in 2014. And as part of just a bit of research into this podcast episode, I went and looked back at some of the articles at the time talking about the real-world auction house, and there was none of this, hey, people from developing nations are playing this game and earning money or losing money or whatever the case is. It was like, hey, we've spoken to this market flipper who earned $5,000 a day. And like, oh, look at all these cool people making loads of money. And there wasn't any of this kind of negative bias to the reporting. But what I found very interesting in an article from Wired is that, first off, they say in the article, quote, when Blizzard announced the auction house in 2011, it sounded like a great idea. And then went on to say, oh, hey, players getting high-level loot can sell it and make money, blah, blah, blah. And then didn't step back and say, but that was wrong. They said, so what went wrong? Almost that they still believe that it could have been correct. It was just implemented incorrectly. And if you go to the end of the article, there's a quote from former game director Jay Wilson, who previously worked at Blizzard, who said, and I quote, "The auction house can short-circuit the natural pace of item drops, making the game feel less rewarding for some players." That's not a criticism of the auction house itself, it's the criticism of the items that they allowed to be sold in the auction house. And this is where I think Web3 games could potentially, or one game will come out there that hits the nail on the head with it, is that if you have, let's say, a World of Warcraft model where, bar one or two very exclusive items, you can pretty much buy and sell anything on the in-game auction house using gold. I don't think that model works in Web3, but let's say if you had a Web3 MMO where all of the legendary items and the best gear, etc., was, soul-bound and it could not be transferred between accounts, and all the other items and materials and etc. were NFTs that you could buy and trade and sell and things like that. I think there's a way for a model like that to work. I'm not a game designer or an economist, but I find it difficult to believe that there isn't a model out there for which NFTs could successfully work in an MMO or any kind of a video game. I just thought it was unusual to see that the kind of the rhetoric 10 years ago on a marketplace, kind of very similar to NFTs basically, was viewed much more positively than NFTs are viewed now. So strange.
Yeah, well, I think it's typical of maybe everything, but particularly in the gaming sector, where at first people aren't sure about it, and then there's some pushback, and you're trying to find a nice balance. And I think to sort of answer my question of whether play to earn and play and earn will exist, I think it's roughly what you said, that it's probably not quite there yet. Nobody's got it right, but there is a way in which the systems could exist. And I don't know why people are so shocked that, you know, developers and players are looking to make money from games. I mean, are you not watching? Have you not seen what's been happening for 20 years? Have you not seen YouTube? Have you not seen Twitch? Have you not seen these people doing coaching for games? There is entire industries circulating, just orbiting around gaming.
Yep.
There's people, education, there's entertainment content, there's live streaming, there's so many ways in which people are already making money from gaming. We've definitely said this before, but imagine 20 years ago saying to, well, you wouldn't have said this because you'd have been like 4, but imagine 20 years ago saying to your parents, I want to grow up and be a streamer or a YouTuber.
Yep.
Even my liberal gamer dad would have said, okay, but maybe get a degree in finance or something, just in case that doesn't work out, you know. And now it's common. It's common for people, particularly, you know, primary, secondary school. They're now saying they want to be, I mean, I hate the word influencer, but, you know, a lot of people want to be influencers. But I think the more reasonable one is they want to be, you know, content creators. They want to, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's a market for it. There's people are desperate for more and more better and better content around gaming. So I don't know why anyone's surprised that there's, you know, more avenues being crafted for people to make money from playing games and enjoying themselves. And I don't know why we balk at it. It feels like a very old-fashioned stance to say, oh, you can't make money from that. I mean, think how long has this been happening? I bet, you know, in the 1700s, future novelists were told they need to go work in the mill rather than write words down. How are you ever going to make money writing words? Like, it's just how we're progressing. Society is, I guess, distribution of money in terms of the working world. Obviously, I'm not an economist. I'm definitely not getting into, you know, wealth distribution. But in terms of the working world, there's far more ways you can make money, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And I think what Axie, they may have got a number of things wrong with their economy, but what they did, I think, touched on something kind of great, that developing nations don't have access to lots of revenue streams generally. The people in these communities, particularly in, you know, that documentary and Samerson, he doesn't have many options to make lots of money. And if games can add, you know, other options, because he says, it might be in the video for that article. I think he was talking about how, or it's one of them, one of those videos, they're talking about how they're a gamer and they love gaming, and then they saw an opportunity to make money from gaming and they took it. Like, why are you demonizing that? What's to demonize? There's a guy that's in a terrible situation that has something he enjoys and has found a way that he might be able to improve his financial situation with it. I don't know why people are so desperate for it to fail. And I don't know how I ended up back on a rant.
I think this is just my personal view. I think the social media age has kind of expected people expect more, they expect it quicker, and they expect it to be the best it can be.
Yeah.
If we go back to early internet, when people first started making money online, with, I don't know, early days of eBay or whatever the case would be, people would have thought it was crazy that you could build a business off that, and yet here we are. To move forward from that, we're currently seeing the first iteration of blockchain games, this brand new industry of NFT gaming, and I think it's irresponsible of us, or for anyone really, to have expected a game like Axie Infinity, that is, in the terms of the bigger picture, so early, to have this perfect economic model that works for everybody. I mean, if you look back in gaming, if you look back in MMOs, some of the things we take for granted in, let's say, an MMO nowadays, like an inventory and your classes and the way you equip items, those weren't solid aspects that the grounding features that you built an MMO around 20 years ago. People had vastly different interpretations of how you carry items, how the controls work, how the in-game economy works, how items are dropped, how quests work, all of this. And we're in those very early days with blockchain games, especially at the moment, where the vast majority of people building the blockchain games you can play right now are not seasoned game developers. There's a lot of first-timers or a lot of indie devs. You're not seeing many people in the industry that have games you can play right now that have been, working at a AAA studio for 25, 30 years, who have a really grounded look at how in-game economies work and how player behaviors work and all these sorts of things. Those games are being built right now, but they're not live right now. And so whilst I think we are going to have games in future that have better economic models and maybe market themselves in a more quote-unquote proper way, those games aren't available right now. And I think to demonize the future of what we're going to see in blockchain gaming based on what we have today, it just isn't right. And it's, as I said earlier, I kind of wish people kind of broaden their horizons and have a bit more foresight when looking at this technology, rather than just putting it to one side and be like, right, I'm never touching this, I don't want anything to do with it, everything on it will always be bad. Because there is a lot of value and there is a lot of potential. It might not all be being realised right now, but it is there, and someone will come across it, and someone will build something viable out of it. Yeah,
it's certainly not binary. It does feel like they just, these sort of articles, people just want to throw it out, like, it was a fad, it didn't work. But like anything, it's gonna need to be iterated upon, and eventually we'll improve it. I think we've covered most of the ground we wanted to cover, but I think we should, as by way of conclusion, we should offer our answer to the title, which is, has play-to-earn games wronged developing nations? My answer to that, and this is for the industry as a whole, play-to-earn games as a whole, not just Axie Infinity, I would say mostly no, with strands of yes. Just in that, I think yes, insofar as there were many games that marketed themselves as ways to earn certain amounts of money, which is suicide in an industry as volatile as crypto, a market that is that up and down. It's irresponsible to do, and I don't know whether they targeted developing nations. Maybe some did. I think that would be unconscionable if they did. But whether they did or not, I do think that they have wronged people by doing that. But there weren't many games that did that. And I think as a whole, the intention of play to earn... Yeah, I mean, this is perhaps a bigger point, but I won't go any further into it. But I think the intention of play to earn was play and earn. I think that was the intention. It was never meant to be an income. It was never meant to be a job. It was just a bonus for playing their game. And I think as a whole, no, the developing nations, I don't think were wronged. I think in many ways they were enriched, however temporarily. And I think, it's something we're going to build on. I think that's my answer. So do you think developing nations have been wronged?
So I broadly agree with you. has play-to-earn gaming wronged developing nations? I don't think that was the intention. However, I do think games, the companies behind games such as Axie Infinity and many other games besides, should have done and could now be doing more to safeguard their users and educate them about the risks involved inherently within crypto, NFTs, and blockchain gaming. I think there is a severe kind of lack of that that education. I mean, we're both from the UK. Anything that is remotely to do with gambling in this country is plastered with anti-gambling adverts. You know, it's the whole. I can't remember the exact quotes, but after every TV advert, on every online advert, wherever you see it, it's, hey, be aware of the risks and what you're getting into.
When the fun stops, stop.
Yeah, oh, well, absolutely. And
my mate was involved in that advertising campaign.
Oh, wow,
so
really?
I thought I'd just give him a quick shout out on that. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
But it was that commonplace when it comes to the aspects of, gambling on, horses or, boxing or whatever. A lot of the same elements of risk are applicable to blockchain games. And I do think that these games and these studios have a responsibility alongside developing these games in a way that helps to safeguard players, to also help educate the players on these risks so they can make an informed decision as to whether this is something that they want to get into. I think that's just the responsible thing they should be doing. I know my favourite topic on this podcast is regulation, but I'd be hard pressed to see if to say that there's not going to be something that comes in place to say, hey, you should probably declare that these are risky things to own and trade and whatever the case may be. But again, that's where people like us come in, and we talk about. We try to educate the people that read NFT Insider and Token Gamer on the risks and present as balanced arguments as we can, and ultimately be honest to the reader about the industry that we're in. We're obviously big supporters of it, but there are ways that it can improve. And
absolutely.
I think when it comes to education and safeguarding of users, there is a lot more that could be done.
Okay. I like that. We don't usually do a wrap-up at the end.
It was good.
Yeah, that worked out well. Okay, so on to our outro. I mean, we'll have done a little cut after the intro, but I think this outro is going to be strong because our intro, we freestyled it in one take and it was exactly right, and we didn't write any script for it or anything. And that's how many times has that happened? Is that the second time in 34 episodes?
I think it's the second time, yeah, which is
really telling of us as dreadful podcast participants. But okay, John, where can people find you?
So for the latest NFT news, you can head to nftinsider.io. We hired 2 new full-time writers this week, so nice. We are working towards daily articles on NFT Insider, plus also broadening our horizons back into videos and live streaming, which are 2 aspects of what I did for NFT Insider that I absolutely love to do, and then just couldn't find the time to. And now, hopefully, starting relatively soon, I'll be able to kickstart those again. So yeah, you can look out for those. In terms of the socials, it's nftinsider_IO. We have giveaways going all the time. I'll be sharing important bits of info from the crypto space, especially in the last week or two when there's been a number of high-profile, Twitter accounts and Discord's been hacked. I try and share that info whenever I see it, so you guys are kept informed. So yeah, there we go with that. For me personally, it is at Hydropowered, HYDROPWRD, on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Clubhouse. Oh, there's definitely some more in there. Of course, I'm tweeting every day about the industry in general, about things to keep an eye out for, and as referenced at the start of the podcast, questions such as how do you define the metaverse, which always generates some interesting debate and discussion. So yeah, be sure to follow me on all of those if you want some more info. I think that's everything from me. Rob, over to you.
That question is such bait. I almost dislike you for putting that question out there because there's no answer. You just want to see it's like throwing money out of a window onto the streets and watching people scrabble below. Yes, where can you find us? So tokengamer.io is daily blockchain gaming news and everything pertaining to blockchain gaming. Then twitch.tv/tokengamer, where we are streaming Tuesdays and Thursdays 8 p.m. UTC, where Jonah, super dope, plays blockchain games and does giveaways, and he's been playing some really cool games lately. I mean, I don't know if he's just excellent at selling them, but it just feels like we've come so far so quickly. With have you seen Earth from Another Sun?
I haven't, no.
Oh, look up the VOD of him playing Earth from Another Sun. That game looks incredible. Anyway, he will be streaming Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then Twitter, it's @TokenGamerNews. And then we've got our Wax companion app with blockchain gaming news built in, which is just Token Gamer. And that's on Android and Apple. And we've got giveaways. A new giveaway went up yesterday, which is... I found it difficult to work out exactly how much money all these NFTs are worth, but we're working with Warsaken, the military strategy trading card game, which is also going to be a physical tabletop game, which is really cool that they're doing both on-chain digital and off-chain physical, which I really like that. But we're giving away, I mean, it's got to be over $500 worth of their cards, so always free to enter. We never charge anyone for that, so just hop in. Is there anything else? We've got so much in the works, but I don't know what I can talk about. So rather than ramble for a little while, I'll just leave it there.
Well, there we go. Episode 34 of the Mint One podcast is in the books, and I just realised for the last 3-4 seconds I was looking into the wrong camera. So
you got more than one camera.
Well,
I've got over there.
I've got my old webcam, which I haven't taken off the top of my monitor yet. So I've just been looking into this one, and all you guys are looking at me over there. So I thought I'd
I never look at the like you saw last week. I didn't even for the intro. It was only when I noticed you did that I now look into the camera. I don't look into the camera at all. I forget. I just want to forget it's there. I don't like being in front of the camera particularly, so I hide from it.
It's so strange. I remember when I started streaming, I almost didn't want to have my OBS window open, so I didn't want to know that my face was being live streamed to the 10, 15, 20 people that are watching. But anyway, back on topic. Episode 34 of the Mint One podcast is now in the books. If you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to give it a like and subscribe, and that would really help us out. And if you've got any comments, YouTube is a great place to do them. Let us know your thoughts on the episode, any topics that you would like us to discuss, any questions that you have. As you'll know, every now and again we do a questions episode where we talk through the questions you ask us. So yeah, coming up on the podcast the next couple of weeks, hopefully. I mean, we've been saying it for a couple of weeks now, but we should have some guests. So
I know. Scheduling's difficult.
Yeah, it's difficult to get the both of us plus someone else all scheduled at the same time. But anyway, hopefully we'll have that to look forward to as well. And of course, if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, 5-star podcast review, I believe you can leave reviews on Spotify now as well. So that would be a massive help to us. Yeah, there we go. Episode 34 in the books. Thank you very much for listening, and we hope that you tune in again next week.